Welcome back, everyone. This is Answer the Life podcast, and today we're interviewing Zita, who is a teacher in the state of Florida. Maybe I shouldn't say exactly where you are, just in case.
Yes.
But today we're going to be discussing, teaching, COVID, all those things, and just basically the education system as a whole, even without all the extra complexity that happened this year. But yeah, we can get started with a simple question. If you want to just introduce yourself for anybody who doesn't know you on the podcast, just maybe a little bit about yourself, like maybe right from childhood to now, like a brief 2 to 4 minute synopsis of your life, who you are.
And you're talking to me right now, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah.
Okay. So my name is Sita Sagara, and I grew up here in Alachua. I attended all of my schooling years here in Alachua County. I went to Santa Fe College, then I went to UF. I studied elementary education, and then once I got to UF, I did special education. So after my years in school, I applied to a job here in Gainesville and I got accepted. And so now I've been teaching. It feels like I've been teaching for 5 years, but it's only been technically my second year. So I've been teaching, and I'm part of the Hare Krishna community here in Alachua. And yeah, I live with my family. We're still here. My intimate family, that is, my extended family is out in South America and Mexico. And I think that's pretty much me for right now.
What parts of South America is your?
So Peru and Ecuador, and they, my dad and mom were part of the ISKCON community over there in Ecuador and Peru too. They actually have Peru has a nice preaching program. They have a restaurant. Apparently it's delicious. I've never been there, but a lot of people go there because they have a lot of different vegetarian type of dishes and Peruvian food. Hans, as you know, it's amazing.
Yes, it is.
And
oh God, it's so good.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I feel like I could be obese and eat Peruvian food and I'd be fine.
Yeah. It is very comforting.
It's so good. I don't know. They just have so many potatoes, and who doesn't love potatoes?
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure.
Awesome.
Wow.
Okay.
So yeah, it's you have a very varied background culturally and also spiritually. It's like a mix. Yeah, it's not often I think one of the awesome things about growing up in the Hare Krishna movement, and not that it's only here, but we hear people talk about America and the cultural melting pot, but I've seen that more in the Hare Krishna movement than anywhere else. And to have, all these people from so many different backgrounds coming together, we get to see the reality that this can actually be there all around the world. And I've growing up now as an adult and having kids and seeing, your perspectives change. What are your thoughts on that? How do you see your spiritual and cultural upbringing? How has that shaped who you are, or what where you're going with your life?
Yeah.
With that.
I think that definitely agree with you, the melting pot, because a lot of people are usually from Europe or something, and then they have their Christian background, and so it's always just one thing. But with Hare Krishna, the community, you could be from Africa, then bring your African culture, the Hare Krishna culture, and that has some Indian culture too, and it's a lot. So for me, it was Hispanic, then Hare Krishna, then I guess current American culture, something like that. So I feel like with Hare Krishna, our beliefs, I'm sorry, let me silence this. I thought it was silenced. Okay. With our beliefs, it's
Detention.
what is it?
I said detention.
I know, referral. It's just a very nice general rules of how to live your life peacefully.
Mhm.
You know, like don't do drugs, don't eat meat, gambling, illicit sex. Like it kind of paves a nice life for you not to get into problems.
Mhm.
And I think as someone who's coming here with my parents from a different country, it was, you know, try to do the right thing, take the opportunities that we didn't have because we were able to grow up in this country where there was a lot of support given to families who kind of like really tried to put themselves out there and took advantage of scholarships,
Mhm.
like government assistance, and if you needed, you know. And so it was trying to do the right thing, and thankfully our community just kind of paves a nice way and connects you with other people who are like-minded and
Mm.
who just want to live and lead a peaceful life. And growing up in Alachua, it's so peaceful.
Yeah.
And
No,
I
it is.
lived out like really out there with my dad. I lived with my mom for a lot of my years, but then whenever I started going to high school, I lived with my dad.
Mhm.
And he always lived out in the boonies. Like it was horrible to get to Gainesville. It would be a 30-minute drive, and as a teenager, you're like, oh my God, the mall, you know, it's so far
Yeah,
away.
yeah.
But I appreciate it now. So it was
Mhm.
a very peaceful life in the
Mhm.
country and going to the temple and seeing your
Yeah.
friends. So it was just, I think it just allowed me to believe that a peaceful life can bring you happiness, which it can, because it's not
Yeah.
bringing you extra chaos or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It's I like, so you really, how old were you when you came here to America?
I was like about 5 or 6 because I remember going to, well, I used to live in Miami. That's another thing. I kind of forgot about that. It was a small chapter in my life. And I went to elementary school there. And in Miami, there was a lot of Hispanic people there. There's the temple there as well.
Mhm.
So I would be learning English and going to school and still part of my community in the temple, because that's where my parents, when we first moved here, that's where we first lived. We lived in,
Okay, Miami.
yeah, like
Mhm.
like Abaya and Sarita, like we used to live near them, and
Mhm.
there was other devotees there too, but it was a nice little community.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that it's, so it sounds like earlier you had said, talked about the support, and then you mentioned like grants and stuff like that. So I, was assuming you were referring to like government programs to help people that want to put themselves out there and actually get the help. But then
Yeah.
it also sounds like your experience in the Hare Krishna community, because I know, moving from one country to another country, that's like a huge deal. You don't know anybody, you don't like, so it sounds like the Hare Krishna community really helped to offer you guys that support as well, which I think is really important for, trying to settle a family down and like, create some kind of stability. And it's nice to see that, for all of its, imperfections, like communities as a whole, there's always going to be issues, but it
Mhm.
sounds like many people that I've talked to over the years have had a similar experience. And I think it's just really awesome that, people can be there for each other like that. So
Yeah, it's definitely really nice. I think that's one of the reasons why people come from different countries and come to Alatra specifically because we have a large population of Hare Krishna people. And so for my dad and my mom, there's really no connection here other than our family now. But when we were in South America, my dad and mom both appreciated Alatra, and that's why we moved to Miami, then eventually to Alatra. We kind of worked our way here. So yeah, it's one of the things that ties us all together is that we're all Hare Krishna. It's
it's really,
Adds a
it's
lot
really
of
special.
ability for I think you meet people that don't have the kind of community we have almost no matter what town you go to some extent. Even if you don't know them, it's like you're sort of like part of the same group, and even if maybe
Family.
issues, it feels like a big family. And I think you also experience a lot of different things, like you were saying, like the melting pot, and that makes it so that when you meet someone that's different or see something that's not something you're familiar with, I feel like a lot of devotees I know, and I know myself, like you don't feel as like affronted by it. Like I've met people that aren't devotees, they almost are affronted by something they just don't, just because they don't know anything about it. And like for us, it's more like, oh, I didn't know that. But like we're so used to finding out odd things, different things, different parts of the world, seeing something that we've never seen before, the different instruments and whatever. And we're just like, yeah, that's cool, like awesome, like like it doesn't bother us at all if things are different, or at least not very much. I mean, if it's like drastic, maybe like somebody's like
like meat eating. I went to Alatra Learning Center, which is now ALA. But there were some kids who would come in and they would bring in their lunch, and it would be like those Lunchables with the little hams. And I felt so bad. I don't think I ever did this, but there would be kids that are like, "Oh my God, you're eating meat!" It was bad. But back to the good point is that we're a nice community who are not really fazed by the differences. I feel like we're more accepting of other people's differences.
And I think with the meat eating, it's funny because Nita and I, the high school we went to, it was like that, but for us, you're vegetarian, like and it I think with it's funny because like I think they would see it as like, what's wrong with you? Like meat is good and it's healthy for you because that's what everyone tells us. So they're thinking, you know, what on earth is wrong with you for not liking it or not wanting to eat it? Oh, what are you, soft? Are you animal hugger? But then from the devotee kid's point of view, or you know, maybe not just a devotee, vegetarian kid, it's like I always saw it as, what's wrong with you? You're killing another living being just to eat when you could be eating something else. And now that sounds like, oh God, what a high horse you're on. That's not the point I'm trying to make. It's just that from both ends of the spectrum, you know, they are each going to have their own like view, but that's where the importance of talking about the differences comes in, so that you can see the other person's point of view and then kind of like come to a little happy medium. And yeah, there's times where I feel like some Hare Krishna people can be like a little overbearing, but for the most part, you know, I think, you know, we try, you know, like Nitai said that you can go to one community and you can bump into somebody and, you know, not know them, but you feel this sense of like belonging. And I think the fact that we, according to our philosophy, try to see everyone as a spirit soul first. You're a devotee, you know, but everyone ultimately is a soul, and we're all, you know, so that common underlying you know, thing that we all share becomes more central. So then the cultural and physical and other aspects are like secondary, whereas in like, you know, the rat race of America we live in, it's more things and materialistic. And because of that, we focus on the things that society tells us is important, which is, you know, what kind of car you drive, what kind of phone you have, you know. It's just really, like the last few years have been really sad kind of to watch.
I
Like,
know.
sad, but also kind of, reassuring, because I feel like more people are waking up to the fact that, like, we need to change as a society. And I think one of the, most important ways to do that clearly is through educating kids. And like, what if you could, like, what do you think as a teacher is the most important thing that you can impart to your students that they can leave your class and take with them for the rest of their life? Not just academically necessarily, but just, if you could get them to get one thing to remember, what would that be?
Yeah, I think that ties into perfectly with what you said about teaching kids as they're young. So that
Mhm.
can be effective, really kind people.
Mhm.
And it goes back to like respecting people as a soul. So sometimes it's really hard for students to grasp academic concepts. And so one thing that I kind of remember is, all right, maybe they're not going to learn how to do this math problem, but
Mhm.
I can at least teach them that they need to be kind to people, and
Mhm.
especially people who learn differently, because in the classroom you can see, so and so might need more help with this, and then
Mhm.
somebody needs less help. And so trying to teach them that everybody's different, and it doesn't mean that they're worth less or that they can be disrespected, is really important. So treating the person as a person instead of their learning disability or something else, some other sort of characteristic. I think that's really important. And it also goes back to kind of problem solving and identifying your own feelings, because as we progress in our age, it's harder and harder to identify your feelings, acknowledge them, and then correct yourself. And so a lot of people dispute, and that's, my dad always is like, the age of Kali, you guys really hard. And I can,
Yeah.
it's, people are arguing more over simple things. And I think that would stop if educators and parents really try to teach themselves about how their emotions affect
Mhm.
everybody's, your actions, and then your actions affect people's mood. And it's just, nobody tries to be malicious, at least the general population,
Yeah.
but it really affects other people. And if somebody would just take the time to acknowledge their feelings, I mean, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but it would help, and it would lessen the problems that there are in those miscommunications, and
Absolutely.
it affects so many other things.
We don't interview
Yeah.
perfect people on here, so
What is it?
we don't interview less than perfect people on here. So
Yeah. Actually, well, speaking of, real quick, I'm looking up something on Database, because what you said,
about the soul.
man, that was, I 100% agree. So you mentioned the age of Kali, which in our culture, for anyone that doesn't know, it's the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. So it's interesting, because if you look, like, in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a verse that I'm looking up, but hold on.
When you said that thing while he looks that up about the soul,
Yeah.
it was like super on point, because I think that that's what the society as a whole in the world right now is missing, is the idea that, like, because even the problems of like racism, prejudice, all these issues that are very prevalent right now, and I mean, they've been more prevalent in the past maybe, but they're still here, they're not gone. And in different parts of the world, they're even worse. And I think it would be difficult to maintain the dug-in status of people's opinions and minds about differences if we all, as a world, realize that there is a soul in our body, that the souls are all the same. Our bodies are a result of karma and etc. Like, having, even if you don't fully understand it, having some idea of that, I feel like it then becomes harder to be dismissive towards somebody just because they are in a different form than you are.
Mhm.
And it, I mean, you see it even with people with their pets. Like, you see how much they love their pets. Like, it's clear that there's some innate understanding that there's souls, that the animals have souls that different, which would then,
Or there are another,
why wouldn't other, you know, like, why would we treat a dog better than we treat somebody just because they're a little different? Or, you know, like, there's so many things, but it's just not what's commonly talked about. It's not what we're taught in public school and the education system. Like, we don't
Yeah.
talk about those types of things, especially since the separation of church and state. Not that that necessarily is a bad thing, but you know, at that point, you even became more unable to talk about anything spiritual.
Yeah.
In school. And you don't want some teacher like starting a cult with your kid either. Like, you don't know. Like, I mean, there's good and bad that comes with it, but it's just so important. I think that would change a lot if there was more discussion about the soul, and I'm really happy to see more and more. You start to see more and more of it being discussed, like Raghunath on the Joe Rogan podcast. Like 10 million people downloaded that episode, and he was talking about Bhakti Yoga and the soul, and that's like huge for the Bhakti movement, just to get the idea out there. Even if you don't want to become and go to the temple, and if you can just get the idea of the soul under your hat and keep it, I think it would help a lot of these issues that are really
it gives people something for people to kind of mull over in the back of their head as they go through their life. And this Bhagavad Gita verse here, to what Zita was saying earlier, chapter 3, text 21. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow in his footsteps, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. So this is why, you know, when Prabhupada came here, his mission was, he wants to change the leaders of the world, awaken the leaders of the world, because they are the ones that, you know, implement the changes in society that we as the commoners end up, you know, to what you talked about earlier, like the general population, right? The psychology of the general population is affected. And so when you as a person fall outside of the social norms, there's this pressure. And if the social norms are driven by the actions of the leaders, and the leaders are promoting not good things, then society is going to follow these not good things. And I think, you know, for all of its benefits, like, I don't know if you've watched the video or the movie on Netflix, the Social Dilemma.
No, I don't.
Man, it's really scary, because like it shows, I mean, you know, social media really talks about the dangers and the downsides to it. And while it is great, it's one of, you know, just like the internet, it's a double-edged sword. So like, you know, I can see, you know, my daughter's getting older, and like her and all of her friends, they're, you know, smartphones, and they're, you know, they're so interconnected that, and, you know, us as parents, we don't necessarily know, unless you are tech savvy, you don't know what kind of things your kids are getting into. Or they could be getting bullied, and instead of being only bullied at school, now they're getting bullied at school, and they're getting bullied in all their group chats, and they're getting bullied on Instagram, and they're like, so the pressures are mounting on kids at a younger and younger age from the technology. So I think, you know, it's very important, like, to counteract that, we have to use the technology to help spread the idea of Bhakti Yoga, or of, you know, this idea of love and compassion for other people. And yeah, anyway, sorry.
I agree.
It's scary when you have kids and then you're starting to see this is the world that they're going to be growing up in. It's terrifying. I mean, you know, they're doing it in China. They're using like facial recognition and all this other stuff to like oppress people. So we can see what it can be used for on the bad side, but we also have an opportunity through the pandemic. You know, so much stuff is coming online. We also have an opportunity to show how it can be used for good. Yeah.
No,
and that's
I
what
love all
teaching
that.
is so important.
I love all that. Love is, I don't use a lot of other social media other than Facebook. And I try not to get on it too much because it feels like my mind is just sucked into like a lot of garbage, because a lot of it is just garbage. And I'm like, I feel like I'm killing my brain cells, but here I am just scrolling through
Got to get that
Um,
dopamine fix.
yeah,
Yeah, that's why they engineer these things like that.
it's scary. And so, but just going back on what Nitai said, the separation of church and state.
Mm,
There's a couple of my students that were talking about some very loaded questions, and one of them was related to religion. And so one of the students was basically cursing another student, saying that they're going to hell just because they're lesbian. And it was like this huge thing because I didn't know how to approach it from a side where I wouldn't start to express my views and
mhm.
without like criticizing anybody else's views. And so
Oh, man.
I went to my counselor, the counselor for the school, and she's like, I would just remind all of the people in that conversation that the basis of all the religions, if you're looking at it closely, is to love people and accept them. And I'm like, oh my God, oh yeah, I was too
Yeah.
far deep into that problem. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, I don't even know how to do it. So it's nice to be able to reach out to those other people who have wisdom and to realize that, yeah, all of the basis of the religions are love each other and to help each other grow, to find God, which is the only person who can be judging other people.
Yeah. And that's the beautiful thing about Krishna consciousness and our approach to our relationship with God is that God is the only one that judges us, but yet I think our view of what judgment is fundamentally different than what the Judeo-Christian religion's view of judgment is. They see judgment as I'm now going to punish you, whereas our view of God's judgment is simply that he's our friend and he's watching us. He's not judging us. He's simply respecting our
like our choices, right?
Yeah, he's respecting our free will, and he's simply witnessing us reap the consequences to our actions.
Right.
And it all, whereas they tend to use it as this fire and brimstone kind of like, we worship, I feel a lot of Christians that don't actually practice Jesus's teachings. They, they approach God more in the way of, I'd rather be in his good graces than risk potentially burning in hell forever.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I think like people with, say Buddhist backgrounds are much, they don't tend to have that mindset because Buddhism tends to be more, it is kind of impersonalist, but it really promotes the peace, nonviolence, love. Whereas that aspect of Christianity has been like forgotten about. It's like, well, wait a second, Jesus was preaching all about love, but they kind of forget that, or and some Hare Krishnas too. It like when religion is used as a weapon to like beat people over the head, that's not spiritual. That's not religion. That's something else.
And I think it's oh, sorry, go ahead.
No.
I know, I was just going to say, it also depends on who's interpreting the message, because sometimes, the person who's interpreting it just has very like black and white interpretation of the message. And so then the congregation takes that message away, and whatever is black stays black. The people who are not Jesus believers, they're going to hell, and the people who believe in Jesus, they're going to do the right thing, their sins are going to be forgiven. So sometimes it's not so black and white, and it's not up to me to decide what the message is, but somebody who is a bona fide spiritual master, and they're the only ones who are going to tell you the right thing. So I think sometimes it's just like very black and white, and that's not always the truth.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think we talk about the judgment too, that the example of that I think you gave in a previous episode, Hans, is or probably, I'm sure somebody like Prabhupada or someone else probably said this at some point, but it's like a child in a sandbox. You know, you have to deal with, you throw the sand in the air and the sand gets in your eyes. God did not punish you. You were throwing sand in the air. And the reaction of that is that you didn't react quick enough and you got sand in your eyes. So
Yeah.
you're dealing with the repercussions of your actions within the sandbox that the Lord created so that you could go and do whatever you wanted to do, just like you wanted. But
Yeah.
there's an equal and opposite reaction to reaction. That's one thing that he got right. And as far as the teaching, getting back into that with what do you think about your childhood or just like your life in general? What led you to want to be a teacher, to want to work with children? Where did that come from for you?
I think it came from the fact that I saw a lot of people in my life doing teaching. I mean, as a child, you're really only at school and at home. So I saw a lot of devotees. Thankfully, I got the opportunity to see that, is that there was a lot of teaching going on. And so I really enjoyed my school. I really enjoyed my teachers. I thought they were amazing, and they still are. Props to Jai Radhe. She's out there still teaching.
Yeah.
And whenever I went into high school, actually not high school, but past high school, college and university is when I started thinking, okay, well, let's see how I can give back to my community, specifically the Hare Krishna community. And one of the ways that I saw that was through teaching. And so I started pursuing teaching when I was in college at Santa Fe. And I was just really looking forward to kind of being like Jai Radhe, because I remember being in her class and she would always make it feel so magical. And then now, whenever I was an adult, attending her BG programs, I'm like, wow, this is such a sweet person. I want to be in her footsteps. I want to follow in her footsteps. And so that's where I got the inspiration to do that. I thought that was always a very sweet choice, and just seeing other devotees do that made me believe it. I could do it too.
Nice.
That's very beautiful. Yeah, Jai Radhe is. I was fortunate enough to go on the bus tour in 2008, and that was like the first time I ever really met and interacted with her and Manu Prabhu. They're very, very sweet. It was one of the best memories, certainly, of my life, going on the bus tour with them.
They're amazing.
Fortunate. Yeah, they are. Yeah.
They give a lot of themselves. And so with the education that you're, obviously now you are a teacher, you just kind of begun your career. From your current perspective on teaching in the education system as a whole, what do you think, not the same thing as what he asked earlier with like, what is the one thing you'd want to like teach them, but what is like the, whatever small handful, 3 to 5 most important parts of the education system to you? And then if you want, it kind of ties into the next one as well. What 3 or 4 things would you like to change? So if there's a couple of things about the way it works, but you can go into how it works now, and then maybe any adjustments that you think would be from your fresh eyes perspective that would be nice to add or change or whatever.
So something that I'm seeing now in education, and then tying into how I could, or what things that I would like to see be changed.
Yeah.
Well, just speaking about Jai Radhe, she teaches at a different school. I don't think it's public, but it's like a different style, Montessori style. And I teach at a public school in Gainesville. So just the student population in itself is very different. And so some of the things that I see in education are they require a lot of testing of children. And it's horrible. I don't like it because the testing is based on the student scores, but the students could come from many different backgrounds and they're still expected to take the same test. So, there's a student coming from a homeless, community or something, like they don't have a home. They're living with, a long distant relative or something. And then somebody who's coming from a complete household, their parents are not divorced. they just have so many different experiences. And one day, like the child who doesn't have a home could have a horrible day, but they're still required to take the same test. And obviously, who's going to do better? Somebody who's emotionally unstable, or somebody who comes from like a good background, who is supported and feels loved. So
wow.
Yeah, they take their
That's
test,
sad.
and then their test lets the state know how well the school is doing, and lets the state know how well their teacher is doing, and then they get their letter grade, which means, you know, an A through an F, and then that's how much funding you get. So it's all tied in there, and I think that's just horrible, because yes, I'm going to do the best to my abilities to teach all these children, but they're coming from different backgrounds, from different kinds of traumas, especially depending on the area. But we have a lot of, we have a high concentration of the Black population, and so it's just hard because they're coming from these families who are divorced, their parents are in prison, and they're still expected to learn the same way as best as they can, take these tests when some of them can't even read. I think that's just not fair to the teacher,
It's not.
to the child, and just it gives them feelings of they can't do it. You know, I can't ever match this.
Feel like they end up feeling like a failure because they don't understand that it's not their fault that they're in that situation. That's just, you know, see, my mom, she works at, I forget the name of the school. It's over there in Gainesville, next to the Lachua Trail. There's like a little elementary school over there.
Oh yeah, Alachua Elementary.
Or no, not Paynes Prairie over in Gainesville.
Okay.
It's but that side of town is, you know, again, the large portion of her kids are, you know, majority African American. It's one of the lower income sides of Gainesville, and I think that especially down here in the South, it seems that, like, you know, people, if you bring up racism, if you bring up inequality like that, there's a tendency, at least I see this in like the white community, the white Southern community, kind of like the sense of like, that was so long ago, segregation happened, it's over, civil rights, you know, that all happened in the 60s. Like, they had more than 40 years to get their stuff together, and, you know, it's their fault. They're not pulling themselves up, but the system, you know, you gave them the civil rights, you did give them these little token things, but yet the system fundamentally is still busted. So now, you know, what you're describing and what my mom describes to me on a daily basis is that the segregation is still there. It's now based on your income. And so all of the, you know, people that are able to, they move their families to the areas where they have higher incomes, so the schools are better funded. My mom is swamped. She's like, has special needs kids in her class. She had like 17 kids at one point. They're like randomly pulling kids in and out of her classroom. She's always flustered. Some of the kids coming in are like, you know, being abused at home and are terrorizing her class. She can't even teach them anything, because it's literally just assessing. And, you know, she made a comment to me the other day that, like, now they sent out some, you know, sheet of like 500 key words that they just want the kids to be able to do these 500 words by the end. It's like in comparison to what I see my children going through, and we're not rich, but fortunately we are in a situation where we are able to access, you know, we're able to put our kids in a Montessori school. It is hard. We do have to pay for it, but I don't regret it. And it's a shame that not everyone has that opportunity. And the public school system, if you're in a good school, is like mediocre at best. I mean, I went through the public school system. It ain't all that great. I homeschooled. I also went to Google. I got to see the spectrum. I can only imagine what a lot of people from poor income communities have to go through. And then the sad thing is, like, if they don't meet anyone later in their life, or they don't ever have the fortune to have a good teacher or someone who really cares about the kids, they may make it through their whole life and never really get, like, they don't even know how to go about looking for the opportunities in a lot of cases, because they've always been in survival mode.
Yeah,
And it's like such a shame.
I
It's
know.
really sad.
It is. And the teachers who come from schools, maybe coming from different towns, they don't want to typically teach at those kinds of schools because they're very difficult to work at. The student population is just very hard to work
Yeah.
with. And my friend right now, she's working at one of those schools and she loves it. There's always going to be those people that really want to
Mhm.
go out there and they want to work at those difficult schools,
Yeah.
but it definitely comes at a price. It feels like you're selling part of yourself to
Mhm.
help these kids, because it's not 5, it's like 18 kids and they're all sucking each part of you. And
Yeah.
you're like, your mom probably can't teach the way that she would be able to teach
No.
if they all came from
Yeah.
very healthy homes, or homes that are more that are able to nurture these kids the way
Yeah.
that a child should be. And it's
Yeah.
nothing like, I'm sure they're doing their best, but
Yeah,
it's
of course.
just the situations that they're put in. It's
Yeah.
very hard to see.
It's also, if they were
Yeah.
raised that way, if they didn't get the opportunities they needed and weren't trained up well enough, then what else are they supposed to do other than what they're currently trying to do?
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't even know how to offer something better for their kids if they never were taught it or never experienced it.
And everyone learns differently too. So even beyond like income gap problems, there's just kids that aren't going to learn. The education system, from my perspective, when I was going through high school, I felt like it was just a game of memorization for unknown reasons. Especially now,
Yeah.
Google anything you need to know. Why would I need to memorize all these random facts that I'm not going to need to know for probably the next 10 to 12 years? If I need to know it, I'll look it up when I need to know it. Like, and I know that
Yes.
there was a point in time where in order to find something out, you had to go find someone that knew it or go to the library and find the book on it. But now that's not the case anymore. And it feels like the education system is still very much built on the idea of like memorizing facts, which is cool if that's something you're into, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that you're smart. That means
Yeah.
like you can learn to memorize things and have no ability to like get through life. And you see it with some people. And I
Yeah.
even like we talked about with in the Shrutis interview, Hans, with the like the fact, I think it's ridiculous that you see so many people that are CEOs of big companies that have been successful. So many of them either barely finished high school or didn't finish high school. Even some of them just dropped out, and most of them had D's and F's and like barely. If they did pass, they didn't have like straight A's. Some of them did, but a large majority of them actually just practically failed out. Some of them did fail out or just dropped out. And they're the people that, beat the system. What do you want to say? They're the smart people. What does it say about our society that the smart people generally get little to nothing
Bypass the
education
system.
and
Yeah.
the education system even grades them as if they're idiots. And yet you see, 10 to 15 years later that they're actually geniuses. So what is it about our system? Like we're failing to even recognize that in an education system. People that are really clear cut intelligent, just like what is the, for me, I always felt like it was just kind of boring in high school just because I was like, what is like, but luckily for me, I learned quickly. Mammy taught me to read when I was like 4, or 3 maybe even. So like in that aspect of it, like the reading at such a young age helped me to like grasp concepts.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't ever hard for me, but it always felt just like I was wasting my time. I feel like a prison sentence, like do your time.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with necessarily learning anything. It's like you get to be there till 3 or 3:30, whenever the time is, and then you get to go home and for a certain number of years before you can go to the next thing. Like it's difficult. I mean, I did skip the grades, but like it's very much feels like it's based on time and less based on learning things.
Time served. Then I think the problem is that they don't teach kids to learn how to learn. And I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about this in an interview the other day I was listening to. And yeah, he's like, the education system exactly fills your head with stuff But the thing is, stuff is irrelevant a lot of the times, because how much science did you sit through in high school 10, 15 years ago that now that stuff is irrelevant. It's outdated. So learning things like, I would say, like, mathematics, things like that. Of course, you need to learn those, but like, I think it's more important, and especially more so with the digital age coming, like, exploding, is we should be teaching kids how to learn, like the meta of learning itself. What do you do? How do you research things? How do you fact check things? Where would you go if you wanted to find out something? Like, now you can just whip your phone out, like you said, and Google it, and when we were younger, I loved reading and I read voraciously, but and so that helped me in school, that when I wanted to research something, I didn't have to, like, agonizingly make my way through pages. I could blast through it and read, and then take what I, learn.
Yeah, like synthesize.
But my grades also, Nitai and I both, we're not idiots, but I did not have great grades in high school, but that wasn't me. I have ADHD. Like, I struggled through high school. It wasn't until I got to college that I actually really even took a better look at math. I'd always told myself, I suck at math. I hate math. I don't like it. But then I started to realize the importance of it later in my life, and I went back with a new mindset, and I realized it wasn't math that was the problem. It was the people who taught me math that was the problem. They didn't teach me,
It's
right.
it was just, I get it, like the rote learning. I think there's a time and place for that, but I know a lot of kids, they have this learned helplessness where they can't do anything without somebody there. And so you're right, like there comes a point where you teachers need to put more projects in there. And that can help you, with your research skills, with your presentation skills. You're trying to pick out the most important things and apply them to what you need to apply. But all of that takes time.
Yeah.
So then, that's where the state testing comes in, because a lot of it is like, okay, we need to prepare these kids. And there's like a balance where teachers want to try to find is, okay, project-based learning, and then trying to prepare them for the test. In an ideal world, it would be project-based learning, maybe some sort of lecture, and then a lot of group work. But it's just, it feels like there's not enough time, and it always feels like there's never enough time, especially if you have students with a lot of emotionally
dysregulation.
Like they can't regulate themselves, and that's part of what you learn as a child. But it's just hard, because I can see it, and I'm frustrated with the system because of it. I'm like, what am I really teaching these kids? And the kids, even themselves, when they're old enough, they're like, why are we even learning this? So I always try to tie in something relatable to them, something that they can actually see applicable, because sometimes it's just, like, oh, sorry guys, you have to learn this, but it doesn't always have to be like that. And part of being a teacher is finding that balance between kind of preparing them for their test and doing those project-based learnings, which those kids love, and they're going to be able to use that technology, which is what they really need, because you'd be surprised how many kids can't put in a username and a password, especially if it has caps lock. So teach your kids how to enter in passwords.
Okay, that's
I think it comes into, you're talking about teaching compassion and all those things, like it all ties in together. And that's definitely, to some extent, my personal frustration with education was that. But I think the testing, like you said already, the testing is probably a large part of the issue. Like the amount of testing that goes on doesn't allow you as a teacher to really have the time, especially if you have kids that are a little rowdy, or like, you have to allow for some time where things are just going to get crazy and you're not going to get as much done as you wanted to. So with all that being the case, how then do you have the time to teach them anything other than to memorize this, that, and the other thing, so that when the test comes, they're prepared? Because otherwise, like you said, school loses funding, then you can't even teach the kids anything. Like, there's this whole cycle that's set up based around the test.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the unfortunate thing, is that I guess they want to be able to measure it in some way. I get that. You don't want just that school that does nothing but babysit people and teaches them jack, but you do want you do want to also be able to understand that, that it would be nice if the state system recognized that the tests, like, or found a better way to test or something where it kind of rated the ability to interact with people. Because you see, like what Hans is talking about, learning, the ability to learn, like you see it out in the world. Like when you're given, like, we need to memorize these things by the end of the month, or these things by the next 3 months, they get checklists all the time. And when you go out into the real world, you don't get a checklist. You have to figure it out now. And you're not getting, and maybe when you go to a job, they kind of tell you these are your responsibilities, but how do you find that job? And some jobs kind of expect you to sort of manage your own stuff to some extent. There's some basic core stuff. And then outside of that, they expect you to, like, know how to operate. And that's when you're learning that usually in the real world, not in the school. The projects and things like that would help, but like you're saying, you don't even have enough time to do as much of that as you'd like. So that's where it's unfortunately, like, the testing comes into such. It would be nice if they found a way to test for the other things as well, or test just a little bit less to give them more time to allow for that kind of learning.
I think it would really help, especially because all children really enjoy it,
Yeah.
And then that way it would teach them at least some strategies to learn after you leave a teacher, because you're not always going to have, like, somebody attached to your side saying, all right, now hit enter, now type in the letter S. It's frustrating to see when anybody in your life can't do anything without you telling them what to do. It's not always going to be that way. And so trying to teach them independence is a really big thing, which comes with responsibility. And it ties into, consequences at home, and having responsibilities at home is a really big thing too.
Yeah, and you kind of answered a question I was going to ask, which was, in the digital age that we live in now, what is one of the most important things you would stress to all parents to give children tools for success? It seems like you're stressing some basic understanding of technology, including
independence and responsibility.
Yeah, and responsibility. Those, like, three things kind of tied in there.
I was gonna say, just being aware of, like you said, Hans, the advantages of technology, but also the dangers of technology, not only with bullying. It's like there's games out there, game systems that are trying to take your identity, and the kids, they don't know about it because they've never really had to deal with it. And I have an 11-year-old brother, and he loves gaming. And then the other day he was like, there's something weird on my screen. And it said something like, send me your email and your password. And he's like, I think it's real. I think it's definitely real. And then anybody, who actually understands what it is, first of all, the email wasn't even capitalized. It was like, lowercase letters. It didn't come from a real source. And I'm like, no, it's not real. He's like, are you sure they're going to block me? And I'm like, no, don't worry about it. So definitely the dangers of technology in that way, like the identity and the safeness. And I was going to say one more thing about it, just being aware, because sometimes I know students have computers in the privacy of their own room, but I think as parents and as people who take care of children, you have to ask yourself, do they really need that privacy? Like, what are they doing? And it's not to say that your child is out there researching stuff, but things pop up, and children are more exposed to pornography. And it's a really sad reality, but it's just something that comes up, and it would be something that I would warn parents of. It's more likely to happen.
And I would say that can play into even the mistreatment of women that goes on still, unfortunately. And the idea, like the way that some guys, without knowing that they're doing it, like I know guys that think that they're super decent, and they are in a lot of ways, but there's still a certain perspective that people have, probably from having friends that are exposed to that, from being exposed to that at an early age, that
Yeah.
think of women, at least in some regard, as like a thing, as like an object, as like a,
Yeah, sexual
Right.
object.
and it's
That,
really
I
not.
mean,
Yeah.
and it doesn't help that our whole society projects that. I mean, you scroll through any Instagram page, and what do we see? Or any advertising, it's always sexual.
Yeah.
Because, and even I was watching some of these cartoons, like I really try to watch what my kids watch as much as I can with them. Because some of these cartoons, or even like the Disney, little sitcom, the kids sitcom things, there's some really sinister shit that gets woven in there. And and the way that they portray the disrespect that the kids show towards the parents in a lot of these shows, if you recognize that, I can see the difference in how my kids treat me when they watch things like that, even though they don't see it or they're not aware of it. I can see it. I see the message that's coming through the TV. I see you watching it, and then later on, I see you acting out that similar behavior. I think a lot of people are quick to dismiss the technology or to see it as it's the new Binky. Your kid's whining and crying, and I'm guilty of this as well. Sometimes, we're in the store and it's like easy to give your kid the phone and here, put something on Netflix.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But it's dangerous because they're, YouTube, all these other things. It's not even, I mean, yes, the porn and other things are that's really bad for the kids at young ages to be getting into stuff like that, or to these online chat rooms where God knows who they're talking to, Discord. But I think what's even more sinister and dangerous as a whole is the things that are actually in your face, the YouTube, the Hulu, the Netflix. If you're not keeping up on what your kids are watching, they're learning all of these messages and all of these things. They're becoming normalized for them because they're watching them on a daily basis. And those things are also being watched. And this is exactly how the general population, their idea of normal gets formed from everyone being exposed to these things. And so I think for parents to be aware of that, and to talk to the kids. So I'm not going to be fanatical and tell them, nope, you're not allowed to watch TV.
Yeah.
I could do that, but also you're hurting the kids in the long run, because me not letting them become accustomed to technology in their future, technology is going to be everywhere. It's going to be integrated into all aspects of their life. So I'm actually hurting them by being overbearing and saying no technology at all and being fanatical. But you're also hurting them if you just give it to them and let them run totally unrestrained. You have to educate, you as the parent has to educate yourself on the technology to be aware of the dangers so that you can educate the kids.
Yes.
Because they're not going to do it in school. I mean, you barely have time to go through the material that you need to go through. So they need to learn that. It's really.
I think definitely there's some classes I think in middle school and high school that teach you a little bit more, they're more digital, but with the elementary, on the elementary, it's not only me who's teaching, thankfully, they go to their specials, their art, music, and they have a media center teacher. So if they have their media center teacher, I've seen teachers, they teach them about being safe online. And so they do it, but, and sometimes when I can, I do it too. But it's always a partnership work, the parent working with the school and supporting what you do.
Yeah. So
that way the kid gets it from all of the angles, because it's fun learning at school and it's fun learning with your friend. And then they get the double dosage again at school or home. So it's good. They're learning some of it, but it definitely falls on the parent too. I think there needs to be that balance, I'm going to teach your child, and I know you're going to teach your child, and we're all going to work together to teach them how to be good thinkers, not just memorizing facts. You said, the metacognition of learning. What do I know? What do I not know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, learning to ask questions, all that's really important. And yeah, I mean, you can't do it all at school, even if you teach them everything. If they go home and the parents just let them sit in front of the TV and watch God knows what all the rest of the time, it's
Yeah.
not to do a lot of what you're teaching. So that is a really important thing for the parents to kind of be aware of more so than they maybe are. It's hopefully one of the we'll see some changes. I mean, the fact that that came out on Netflix, I thought was interesting because to me, it's like it's right there now for people to see how much this is like really affecting people beyond what they realize, and how it's even engineered that way.
Oh, the social dilemma.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
moving out of that into maybe slightly, well, yeah. So if you had a chance to re-experience your childhood, is there anything that you would change?
So I took the time to think about it, and I didn't want to burn any bridges with my family. No, I'm just kidding. I feel very fortunate to be in my family. I would say that something that would help everybody, would help me, is normalizing therapy and really problem solving, because sometimes in your family you don't get to see healthy coping strategies or problem
Yeah.
solving, and so that's what you're learning. And then since counseling isn't available for all the students as a class, that is something that I feel like everybody would benefit from. Like, think of how many problems would not occur or
Yeah.
be resolved quickly instead of resulting to fists and screaming matches
Yeah.
and I don't know, bribery or something like that. I feel like anybody could, especially coming from a Hispanic household, which my mom and dad joke like, oh, I don't need therapy. But I think that everybody could benefit from something.
Yeah.
You know, that it's
I
nice to
100%
acknowledge
agree.
your feelings and
Yeah.
that have traumatized you. That way, whenever you have a relationship or you're in your workplace, you don't have to bring that trauma with you.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's a
100%.
really good point for, I mean, just like it's kind of like we focus so much now, like on the physical, so much like even with like the women thing we were just talking about or whatever, like guys and women go to the gym, work out, like, and do yoga and like trying to get fit. It's like become like a thing. But mentally fit is just as important. And it's almost
Yeah.
like there's been a stigma for years. It's starting to become a little more normalized to talk about, thank goodness.
Mhm.
But for years, it was almost like if you said that you were going to therapy, that you were like saying you were broken, something was wrong with you. It's like,
Yeah, you're
we all
like
have
a
stuff
leper.
we dealt with, you know,
Yeah.
like, no, like I just want to work on myself and be aware
Yeah.
and make sure I'm not mistreating people in my life in ways I'm unaware of. And I just want to be more
Yeah.
conscious and loving towards people in my life, like towards everyone. And I think we all have the things that we could work through, no matter how charmed of a life you
course.
think you have led.
Oh, definitely.
And
Yeah, I say there is no such thing as a perfect there's no such thing as a perfect childhood or a perfect, life. We're in the material world. Like, come on. Every one of us has gone through, I mean, just being born is traumatic. I mean, like physically, emotionally, I mean, it's like, not to mention all the little things. And I think that it's really the little things, the repeated exposures, the repeated, experiences in your home, exposures to, the less overt forms of, maybe abuse or neglect, those things actually are what really traumatize people in the long run, not necessarily just the one or the, I mean, the physical abuse, of course, is extremely traumatizing, but, in some ways, the mental or the more subtle neglect can be more damaging in some ways, because
well, the physical,
if you've never even learned to acknowledge that, wait a minute, this isn't right. Like, your whole life is fabricated on this really rocky, sandy, like, foundation, and it just sets you up for, so yeah, totally. Mental health is like something I am such a huge advocate for. I've had, since I got out of the Army, I've been going and utilizing that. I get free mental health care through the VA, thank God, because it's expensive and not everyone is able to get it. And that is like one of the biggest shames. I've seen so many friends, over the years commit suicide, or some of them very close friends, and see them just destroying their lives with hard drugs and alcohol, and it's because they either don't have the means to access it, or the stigma of seeking treatment is what prevents them from going. And it's absolutely one of the saddest things to watch. Yeah.
I think funding is a really big problem. I feel like that would be one of the things that I would change, because I think it would be life changing if you had one of those classes that dedicated to that emotional growing. Like, okay, why am I feeling this way? Why am I treating people this way?
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm not perfect, but it really does take a lot of mental work to think about why you're doing the things you're doing.
Oh yeah.
And it's like you don't want to do it,
you don't.
Like,
it's your defense mechanism.
Yeah.
You don't want to look at that.
Yeah, it's always the other person's fault. So
I'm okay. I'm all right. I'm fine. Yeah.
I'll get by. It's fine. But you're right. It's the little things.
Yeah, the little things, and when you get the therapy, or actually the thing is, you don't even necessarily need the therapy. Going back to the learning how to learn, before I even started going to therapy, I started going online, and just because I knew how to research and look up things that I wanted to learn out of my own curiosity, that alone, I think, would be enough to help out a lot of people. I feel most people don't, if you just ask them about, depression, bipolar, anxiety, or any of the common mental health issues, most people don't even understand them at all. There's not even, they just think, oh yeah, depression. Don't you just kind of sit around and you're sad all the time and you feel like killing yourself? It's there's so much more to it than that. Mm-hmm. But because, if people just learned how to, I think the first step is learning how to even analyze your own thinking. You have to, and I think that's one of the ways where Krishna consciousness has helped me in my life, that because we identify as the soul and not the body, when I'm struggling and going through something, I have the saying, when in doubt, zoom out. So you zoom out and look at your life from the big picture, and then you realize, wow, the things that I'm struggling with and going through right now, big picture in the grand scheme of my life, they're insignificant. But that doesn't mean I don't need to address them, but it just means I don't need to get stuck here. Mm-hmm. That's you end up getting bogged down in that. And when you can try to come back to the place where I'm not my body, I'm not my experiences, I'm witnessing my experiences, and what can I learn from this so that I can not experience the same thing again, is very important in the journey to try to work through these things, because we all have them.
I think I actually saw a quote online. I forget who posted it, but it was a devotee who is a disciple of Acharyapad. Acharyapad. Mm-hmm. And the quote said something along the lines of, first you have to be a good person, then you can practice Krishna consciousness. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where everybody's at. That's especially where I'm at. I'm trying to be a decent person, so I can at least identify, or so that I can at least absorb some of that really great knowledge. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, if you don't have compassion for other people, if you don't have compassion for other living things, then you can't really understand all the other philosophy. It's just that's the basis, the thing that you need to understand first.
Compassion.
Yeah,
for sure. That's very and you have to have compassion for yourself first, so that you can also then share that compassion with others. I think. And I think that's another problem, is that a lot of people think that they're taking care of themselves, but they're really not. They're taking care of their senses. They're doing things that make them feel good, but they're not actually doing what's in their own best interest. Yeah. And so it's hard to have compassion for others when you yourself don't even know what true compassion is, you know, and that would be, you know, being able to see your life from this bigger perspective, I think, is where compassion like plays that role. You can see, oh, just as I'm struggling through these things, so are other people also. And the way I feel about this, oh, how would I feel if I was in that person's shoes? It has to start, you know, to be able to recognize your own stuff so that you can then feel that for others.
Yeah. That's the empathy. That's sometimes what, a lot of the times, is what people lack. They think that they're the only person in the world going through what they're going through. And yeah, that's something that everybody's working on, and children are obviously developing that. And as teachers, we're trying to help students develop that empathy for people. And that, thankfully, that's just a big part of Krishna consciousness. I remember one time, Kalyapani Prabhu, I met him at Krishna lunch, and he was asking me about my day, and I told him, I'm sorry, I'm getting teared up. He's such a great devotee. He asked me about my day, and I told him, nothing. I'm not doing much. I'm just teaching. And he's like, oh, you're just teaching. That's the most important thing. And I told him, I'm like, well, I'm not really teaching Krishna consciousness or anything. I'm just teaching the general subjects. And he told me, he said, oh, well, you're teaching them about themselves, and that's the first thing that they need to know to be able to be open and accept people. And so I'm like, I don't directly teach them Krishna consciousness, but if I can teach them about accepting themselves, then it's just like a small little thing. Yeah.
I mean, that's what Krishna consciousness is ultimately. Krishna is within all of us. He is there, sitting next to us as our best friend. So if you can even nudge someone to turn inwards just a little bit, even if it's a seed that you plant that maybe they don't remember it till they're 30 years old, but that one exposure, that one, because it's coming from the depths of your heart and with love and empathy and compassion, it makes it that much more powerful. So that, you're like this one Prabhupada lecture that I was hearing the other day, he said it's like an inoculation. It's like you go to the doctor, you get a shot to prevent you, so he's like, this inoculation of Krishna consciousness it's the vaccine for Maya, basically, something like that. So I think if you see each of your interactions with the kids like that, that's really powerful. You are just a little bit, but that's all it takes. Just a little bit. All it takes is one spark to start a fire. And with a little bit of nurturing, hopefully at home and, along the way of their life, that can like turn into a fire. And it's really special what you do. And that was like Krishna in his heart right there talking to you some days when you just need to hear it. That's awesome. That's so beautiful.
Yeah. So I'm trying to, every time I lose my mind in the class, because it's kind of like being a parent. I'm like, oh my God, I just told you, let's do this all together. Let's do this, or else I'm turning the car around. I try to think about them as little spirit souls. They're coming into my classroom, doing the best they can. They just want someone to connect with them. And so this year, last year was my first year, so I was just trying to survive, let's do this. Let's try to get through this content. But I'm realizing more and more that, I might not get to teach that thing that one day, but as long as I'm getting to connect with these children, just like when you're outside of school, you're connecting with someone, that's really important. And then it makes everything else easier. And so if I'm trying to address them as not, all right, let's do this, you know, just a number. Let's do this. Let's learn this. Okay, next, repeat. Let's do this.
Mhm.
It just makes it so I'm kind of addressing them where they're at, what they need. You know, are they hungry? Are they tired? Are they upset? And I think that was one of your questions, like explain a time when a child in your life like changed something.
That was literally the next question I was going to ask. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, really? So maybe you can ask the question and I can answer.
Tell us of a time when you had your whole perspective shifted from an interaction with children or a child in your personal life.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, I'm always thinking about this one experience. That very first time that I saw that question is I was still a student teacher, and this student had autism, and he was just having one of those days where he had his meltdown. He wasn't doing anything, and he had crawled under a table, and instead of going to ask the BRT, which is the behavior resource teacher, you know, you ring the bell, you're like, I need assistance in whatever room, like I need this child out of the room. I could have easily done that. But then I went under the table and I'm like, okay, what's going on? Is it because I hurt your feelings or something like that? I think I had said something. And he nodded his head, and then I told him, well, I didn't mean it and I'm sorry. Is it okay if we come from under the table now? And then as soon as I apologized, he came from under the table and he started doing his work. So I think that's where the self-regulation and the empathy for other people comes in, is I'm trying to relate to you, what's going on, and let's try to see if we can turn this around. Because it's really hard when you're in the moment as a teacher and a lot of times as a parent, your child is doing something they're not supposed to. And sometimes it shifts your mind. You're like, why are they doing this to me? They know I have this important day, this important meeting, but it's hard to change that perspective. Like, it's not really them doing that to you. They're having some sort of issue and they need that problem fixed, and they just don't know how to communicate it. So for him, especially with a child with autism, he just didn't know how to say it. He's like, you were rude to me or something. I don't even remember, but you know, I'm crawling under the table because that's how I'm going to solve this problem. Definitely changed my perspective.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really.
Thank you for sharing that.
To let go of being right, which is partially what you did for the moment. It didn't matter whether or not he was acting up before, which is why you said something. You went under the table and let go of your ego. And that's something that's also difficult for a lot of people to do. A lot of us, without even realizing it, myself very much included, make ourselves right in so many situations that it's not important to be right. Like the other day, we were in the store. I was getting we were basically figuring out what we were having for dinner, and Bryn and Dama were with me, and Bryn said something about like, oh, well, I think it was Bryn that said it. One of them, I believe it was Bryn, said like, oh, well, why don't we get some frozen pizzas so that the noodles you made you can have for lunch for work tomorrow? Because it was a Monday and I worked the next day. And I was like, actually, there's plenty. We could have it for dinner and I could still have for lunch tomorrow. And then I was like, but we could still get the frozen pizzas. And then immediately, like right after I left my mouth, I'm like, why? So I just immediately said, well, I just had to make you wrong before I agreed to the plan. So I like immediately caught it and apologized, but it'd be nice if I had caught it before it left my mouth. But like those little things, like and then I started like wondering like how much of that am I doing? Because like, you know, how often am I doing these little things that like maybe it's not a giant deal. I didn't say it in the rudest way or anything, but it's still like unnecessary to invalidate people just to make yourself right. Like why? What did I gain from that? You know? And so I've been trying to be extra aware of that in the past couple of weeks since that specific. It's funny how like one little thing sometimes will finally like, get you to like pay attention to the shit you've probably been doing your whole life, and it's like, okay, let me try to like hone in on this and do some things and try to be a little bit better about it, be a little more conscious about what I'm doing.
For sure.
But I think that plays into what Kalipani was telling you too, that I've always thought that a really powerful way of preaching isn't to be preachy or to talk about even religion or spirituality per se. Of course, that's sometimes involved, especially at certain steps. Like at some point, it has to be discussed. Mm-hmm. But if somebody just knows you and likes you guys get along really well, or they respect you, and then they find out you're a devotee, that alone changes their perspective. Because like sometimes like people don't know whatever, they know you have a different name, whatever, but they don't know much. like that alone changes their perspective. I have a coworker that said like somebody was being like a butthead at a park or something, and they were a Hare Krishna. And he was telling me that the way he handled it was different, because he was like, normally he'd be annoyed by them, plus they're different and they're being a butthead. And so he's like, man, but he was like, but
Those
he
Hare
knew that I
Krishnas.
was a Hare Krishna. And so he's like, well, these might, for all I know, they're Nitai's friends. Like, I got to be respectful, at least in the way I handle this. Like, and then he was like saying that it was nice to like have that, like, before me, he didn't really know anything about the Hare Krishnas or anything about us. And now he knows a little bit about us. And obviously, if we get along, then he's going to try to be more like, so all of that, helping them feel like they're part of the melting pot, helping them see you handle your emotions, let go of being right, do what's best for them in the moment. If later on they grow up and they find out that their favorite teacher is a devotee, that's going to be huge for them, whether or not you said Hare Krishna in the classroom.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to be
huge,
life changing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as it is, like, on like me growing up and having gone to Gurukul and Vrindavan and Mayapur, and as well as even some of my experiences in the military, having some of my platoon sergeants and squad leaders that like really touched me. Like some of them, even through just a very brief interaction, but years later now, looking back, I can see, wow, that person had such an impact on the way I think about certain things. And then, he's absolutely right. They're going to look, remember you fondly. Maybe they don't even remember your name, but they just remember, man, I had a teacher when I was younger and she was just awesome. And then, if they find that out, it will change the way they think about, maybe the reason she was that way is because of what she believed in. And it may trigger them to want to like look more into it. Or just into spirituality in general. And like,
And even if they don't get into spirituality, seeing the way you handle your emotions, like you said, the first step is being
just in a healthy,
at least on a material
healthy way.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna hold on to that. Treasure it, because sometimes it's really hard, especially when you're dealing with day-to-day things, and just life gets in the way, and it almost feels like I'm not even practicing, but if I'm thinking about Krishna, if I'm trying to understand my little people, then I'm doing thing. And maybe it doesn't look like I'm going to the temple every day, but I'm still doing something small, and I think that brings you life, and it gets you from your routine, because like Maya, it always sucks me down. And then just like you did, Hans, like when in doubt, zoom out. By the way, I'm stealing it. Sorry, I have all these alarms. It's actually for my job. It's telling me like, okay, go pick up the kids. When in doubt, zoom out. Really think about that, because there's so many problems in the system that I work in, like in all of the systems, that there's so many problems. And so I'm like, wow, I could get really depressed by it, or I could remember in the long run, it doesn't really matter. And what I'm trying to do is connect with other people and connect with devotees. That's what's really important.
That's absolutely on that, there was a verse that or a purport that I read the other day, talking about devotees and Maya, right? Prabhupada says here, a devotee, however, even though immature, never falls down from the path of devotional service. Even if he displays occasional weakness, he is still considered a devotee if his devotion to Lord Krishna is very strong. Even if, and then this is a verse from Bhagavad Gita, even if one commits the most abominable actions, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated. Nitai and I talked about that verse in one of the other episodes, not to like, that some people may take it as just as some people, Christians do. Oh, I accept Jesus, therefore I can do no wrong. Mm-hmm. No, but Krishna doesn't forget you, even though you may sometimes forget him. And I think, as long as you're even just serving those kids, as a teacher, Krishna is within them. So even just by you being kind to them, you're still rendering service to Krishna or to his devotees, because or his, we're all his children. So, even if you do feel like you're not necessarily the strongest sadhana warrior, which I know I am not, but every day if I go in and I have an interaction with a patient and I can maybe make that patient smile or sit there and listen to them tell me about something, they're don't have visitor and they're dying or they're really sick, like just a little bit, if you can connect with that person, even just a couple minutes, you're making their world a better place. They could be having a totally shitty day and all they needed was someone to listen to them, or whatever. So a little bit of sacrifice on your end, you have no idea what kind of an impact that can have on somebody else. Yeah.
I think that's what one of your questions, Nita, like what really brings you happiness is like seeing other people happy and seeing their connections.
Yeah.
Like really authentic ones, like unlikely friendships forming. It's really fun to see. I would have never put 2 and 2 together, but all of a sudden they're friends. And at the beginning, one of them was crying, saying like, no, I don't want him in the classroom.
Yeah.
Like, it's gonna be okay. I'm sorry, I can't make that choice. He's part of our class now, but just forming those unlikely connections.
Yeah, no, that's really, really powerful, and it shows that it's possible to overcome our preconceptions, our preconceived notions about people and things and places and all of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I feel like there was something. Well, I have one last, or maybe I guess technically 2 that are fairly quick questions, and then we can start to head towards wrapping up. But there was something. What were we just talking about? Oh, I was just going to say that's chapter 9, text 30. Zita, that verse you just read, and the purport on that is super powerful. I have started, like I've read it multiple times, and I love that there's a spot in the purport too where it says, a spot on the moon does not get in the way of it shining. That's not exactly word for word, but something like that.
Yeah.
Where like, yes, you're going to make mistakes. And it's mainly actually, a lot of it is talking about judgment, which is basically saying like, it is not my place to like, oh, Zita didn't go to the temple today. What a non-devotee person, Meanwhile, she's there caring for tons of children, trying to bring Krishna into their lives, trying to practice in her heart while she's dealing with children. It's not my place to judge. If you have a spiritual master, a spiritual teacher, that's what they're there for, and they guide you. And you may even have a couple of like really
they guide, but they don't judge.
Siksha and Diksha gurus. You may have a few people that you trust to give you that kind of advice, that know enough about your life that the advice is like worthwhile for you to hear. But especially people that don't know enough about your life. And it's a good practice for us to know, first of all, somebody else is doing that to us, not to take it so personally. And secondly, or not to worry that they're right. And secondly, not to do it to others. So it's so easy to judge people. They cut you off in traffic, they do this thing or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, so we jump so quickly into making them wrong and ourselves right. I think that verse is really cool. I've read it like so many times now. It's like ingrained in my brain. It's the only verse
I wrote it down. I'm gonna have to check it out.
Yeah, it is. It's a heavy one for sure. It's good.
I was reading that chapter on live on IGTV, and then I got to that verse, and it sounded like they were excusing, like you could be a murderer, but as long as you say you're Hare Krishna, like at the face of it, you could easily take it that way. I'm like, that can't be what they mean. So when I got to the end, I went back and read the purport, and then it explains the purport is so powerful. I mean, it really, really breaks it down and makes it very clear what they're talking about. And I think that's a verse that all of us could use, like to keep in our mind a little more. Like I think it would solve a lot of the judgment issues that we do have in our community, and just in general within a lot of communities there's some issues with judgment.
No, for sure. That's a very good point.
So we have 2 last wrap-up questions. How has your view on spirituality evolved from those that you held as a child?
I think this is something that I've been thinking about throughout this whole interview. Whenever I was younger, I used to think of Krishna as like a father, someone who looked out for you. And I think it's very important to say that I never thought that Krishna was going to bring any judgment down upon me. I feel like maybe other religions kind of do, like there's a father and he's going to judge me for whatever I do. So I never felt that way. So when I was young, I saw Krishna as a father, someone who was there if I needed to talk to him. And then now, as I'm growing a little bit more older, he's still got that authority that I'm kind of seeing him more as a friend.
Mm.
And I know that there's different relationships that you can have with Krishna, which is really amazing if you think about
Isn't
it.
it?
It's like, it's amazing. It's mind blowing. Like whatever
Yeah.
you need Krishna to be, he's there. So kind of thinking Krishna more as a friend, seeking that friend out, making sure that that friend feels special. So thinking about Krishna, making sure you're serving Krishna in some way. I know that he has everything, but if you think of him as your friend and you have your friend over for lunch, like what are you gonna serve your friend? Would you like some water? Would you like a sandwich?
Mhm.
And just thinking about that and talking to your friend, because that's
Yeah.
the way that you maintain that relationship. So I think in a way that's shifted to something else. And I don't know, you know, Krishna might change to the parent again or something different. I think it's kind of cool how it could be like either way, but as long as you have that relationship, that
Yeah.
counts.
I mean, he says, Krishna says that, and I'm not quoting verses now, I'm not like on that level, but, whatever way we want to reciprocate with him, Krishna reciprocates with us.
Yep.
And I had a realization the other day. I was having an interaction with my son, and I was hearing my mom, she has the Krishna book on audio tape in her van, and I was like driving it, and it was telling the story of when Lord Brahma comes and kidnaps the cowherd boys and the cows. And so Krishna immediately manifests himself as those cows and cowherd boys and goes on as if nothing happened. And it hit me so hard. Like, obviously it's like, anyway, but it hit me very like close to home that those in your, like, treat those in your life as if they were Krishna himself. And I found like the point of that pastime in one sense was that Krishna was trying to show that, the parents and the way and the moms, the dads, the cows, the way that they're loving their children, right now I manifest it as them, but they're really not any different than the original cows and cowherd boys that were taken, because I'm also within their hearts. And so, it made me realize that if we can try to treat every relationship in our life, because we all have different relationships, mom, dad, kids, friends. If you try to treat your friends as if you were having a relationship with the Krishna within them, the Paramatma within them, then that's really where you're, when you can live your life on that level, like someone like Srila Prabhupada or Jesus Christ, that is like true perfection. So you're seeing all of these other people in your life, not as the walking meat suits, but as the spirit soul and the Paramatma within them. And it was just really, it was a very, it's a very powerful way, I think, to walk through your life and try to see your relationships as something to strive towards.
Mm-hmm.
That, we, Krishna's just, anyway. Sorry for rambling.
No, that's a great.
It's so beautiful.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That's so sweet. I still don't think I understand how Krishna could be a lover, but I know that
that's the highest stage, and
Yeah,
we ain't ready for that,
that's bewildering for our mental states. At least mine.
You're right. We're not ready for that.
We're not. And that's because, with the conditioning we have, we see the lover relationship. For us in the material world, it's all about sex. It's a sexual, lustful attraction.
It's also selfish. Most of what we call
yeah. Whereas with the
to
transcendental, it's not about that. It's about the deeper connection that you have with that other person. It's not about the physical connection.
Yeah.
And that's what I think really is so magical about the relationship with Krishna and the gopis. It's, you got this cultural taboo, but that's not what it's about. It's about the hankering and the just total devotion and love and willingness to give up everything, your family, your kids, your husband. You don't care. You care about Krishna more than any of
You
them.
don't care.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's
trash.
where they're at.
It's all about Christian now.
Yeah.
But I think too that there's like the idea like a lot of our love is mixed in with lust, and then even when it's not lust per se about like a sexual nature, it's also just like, you know, a lot of relationships are somewhat based on what you get from the other person or what
Yeah.
they're doing for you.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that, I mean, that's just sort of the way the material world works to some extent, but that's the difference. And that's why it's so hard for us to grasp, because for them, it is all completely selfless, not selfish. Whereas our experience of love is mostly like 90% selfish, or at least 80, some fairly high percentage. Even when it seems like it's a healthy selfish or whatever you want to say for material standards, it's still to some extent there's some selfishness behind that. And in the spiritual world, there just isn't any of that. And it's very difficult for someone as messed up as I am to even begin to grasp such an idea.
For sure. And the crazy thing is that pure love, that like bhakti, it's the most powerful thing in creation, really, because it's so powerful that the love of Radharani and the gopis completely captivates Krishna, who is the supreme controller. But even he's tied with the love of his devotees. And that story, you know, that, you know, Kartik comes around, that story of Mother Yasoda tying Krishna is so deep.
Yeah.
Beyond just some, you know, cute little story that, you know, like there is, you know, it's a very real practical example of how pure selfless love can even capture him. And yeah, it's.
Yeah. I think that ties into something that I listened to a couple of years ago. It was Mother's Day and it was at the temple and there was a Sunday class. And I think the topic was relationship with Krishna. And one of the statements that was made is, if you really want to understand the selfless love that Krishna has, or that you can have for Krishna, or, you know, like a physical relationship that you can actually see in the world, is having a child and that relationship with a child and the mother, because what a mother gives is completely selfish. She just wants her child to be happy, and that's an example of Krishna.
So powerful. Yeah, for
That is
sure.
a great example. Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, I love my mom.
Yeah.
Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah.
But it's very sweet, and that rocked my world.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
wow,
the last
this has been invigorating.
Yeah,
you got one more
question that I have written down, and then any last statements that any of us want to make, we can do that too, as long as we have the time for it. I know we ran a bit over what we planned on.
Oh yeah.
The last actual question though would be to tell us about a time when you experienced some failure, and maybe a fairly large one if you have an example, and then how did you overcome it? Or how did you, you know, jump back from it, stand back up, shake yourself off, and maybe
a failure or a fear that was preventing you from doing something.
And how did you overcome it and then achieve? And you try and how did it change? Maybe you tried something new as a result of it.
Well, I think the biggest thing in my life, and I'm trying not to identify so much as this, but in my teaching, it's like all about it. And I'm trying not to do that because I'm more than a teacher, right? But just this year in teaching the pandemic, I changed a lot of how I was teaching. First, I was teaching third, then I moved through fifth, then I was teaching online, then I became high flex, and now I'm finally back brick and mortar. During that process of going high flex, which is, you know, teaching in person, teaching online to fifth graders, it felt like I was drowning in work, and that I had nothing else, and that I was a robot. Just, I'm going to go to sleep, I'm going to eat, then do work and repeat. And it was depressing, you know. I'm like, I'm forgetting everything about my family, about my spiritual needs. And so I tried to reach out to my other coworkers, my family, and I think my family just kind of helped me realize that I don't have to let this job take over my life, just like maybe any other job. And my dad is he's always telling me, just do the best you can in your job, but remember, that's not the most important thing. So back again to what you said, when in doubt, zoom out. You know, in the long term, this isn't always going to be your life. This is not your identity. And to really try, I really tried when I was going through that struggle, and still am, not to identify so much with being a teacher and being a daughter and all of these labels that I have for myself, because that's not really who I am. So it's just always thinking about those labels and how I can't let it define me. I'm more than, and my purpose in life is not to just teach kids math, you know, and all the other subjects, but it's my purpose in life is to realize my true goals, which is Krishna, ultimately to develop a relationship with Krishna. So really going back to just the basics. Why am I here? Who am I really? And so during COVID, there was a lot of great lectures going on out there. And thankfully I got to listen to some of them, but I'm like, wow, this is really great. Even for someone who grew up in the movement, just like repeat the basics. It's really good.
Yeah, no, I think what you said during the pandemic, right? First off, I just wanted to say, shout out to all the teachers, especially like your first year of teaching really was in the pandemic. And when you mentioned that much earlier, the thought that popped into my mind was like, you know, Johnny Smith, age 17, getting drafted, and hey man, you're going over to Normandy, you're going to storm the beaches of Normandy, that's your first mission. Like that's and my sister-in-law also last year was like her first year on her own, and like I can't imagine, you know, what you guys have gone through. But you said you felt like you were drowning, and I can definitely share that sentiment. Working in the hospital the last year has been very intense, to say the least. And that's exactly. That's what gets me through. You know, I feel myself getting sucked down the rabbit hole. It can be you forget to take care of yourself. You feel like you're on autopilot, just coming home, you're worn down, you're exhausted. Then, you know, and in my case, I feel kind of crappy because I'm like, I don't have the energy to like do the things with the kids, or like, you know, we can't go out, and like I'm worn down, I'm beat down. It's really hard. And when we grow up in the movement, it's easy sometimes to forget the basics. It's easy to think, well, I am a devotee, and you know, but you know, are you remembering the philosophy, or are you only applying it when you want to apply it? If you are a devotee and you are practicing, you know, we have to start shifting our mindset. And that's where I think, even though it was a struggle during the pandemic, I think it also forced many of us to re-examine the things that we did take for granted and see the value that Krishna offers, or our relationship with God offers us in our life, in our day-to-day life, not just, you know, yeah, someday I'll get on that and I'll maybe, you know, get into spiritual shape. But like, you know, Prahlad Maharaj says, like, you can't waste your time. You need to do it now, because you don't know when, you know. Anyway, but on the plus side, I feel like if you made it through the pandemic as a teacher, it can't really get harder from here, can it?
Hoping.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
Hopefully it'll get easier.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you for everything that you do. Teachers are the most important job, I think, in society. I mean, if we don't have good teachers, what the hell are we? You know? So
yeah, huge.
Keep up the good work. You know, we need everyone like you. And anyway.
Thank you. No, thank you. You guys are great, especially parents. I know it's hard. Everybody's doing the best they can. So shout out to parents and families and other people who are raising it, because other people who are raising the kids, because it really does take everybody. It takes
it takes a community. Yeah, it really does. Yeah, if you don't have, I feel for people. I mean, they don't have a strong community. That's hard. You know,
Yeah.
parents moving away, they don't have grandma and grandpa around. They don't have like, yeah, it can be, you can feel so alone, you know.
Yeah. And then it runs into a whole bunch of other problems. So that means shout out to you, Nita, because you're part of the family who takes care of the kids too and who teaches them. You're the fun uncle.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, like growing up for us, we had a great community. We could just wander around the community and go to different people's houses, and it was just like everybody was home. So that really means that's a world difference for a kid. So yeah, having a community and that the spirit of like, you know, dealing with different children, whether they're yours or not, and trying to teach them something in whatever time that you have with them. This has been really great, but we've well ran over an hour. I think we're closing in on 2. So we can start to wrap it up here. But if possibly in the future, if you ever want to, we can definitely do a follow-up and check in on months or something. See how you're doing post-COVID. Hopefully that becomes a reality at some point.
Yeah, post-pandemic progress.
Yeah, post-pandemic progress. But yeah, thank you very much for being here with us and taking the time out of your day to sit here.
Yes.
And, thank you for patiently waiting in the waiting room earlier.
Oh, you're welcome. No, thanks for having me. You guys are awesome. I loved our conversations. I definitely feel a little bit more connected to Krishna. That's what I mean. Like, you need devotee association. You guys have been really great.
Yeah, no, it's important. You got to keep it, you know, if you don't get the association, it's like going to the gas station. You got to keep gas in your tank, otherwise you run on fumes and then your car is dead on the side of the road.
Yeah.
You know, you gotta keep it up. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited. We have so many amazing people in this community that we'd love to connect with like this and try to share, you know, wisdom with each other and our experiences and what we've learned from it. Because
really
just
whatever. We're learning a lot from it. We have a lot to learn.
Well, I would love to see the other interviewees. Like, if you ever get Mother Jairade on here.
Oh, yes. Well, now that you sat here and mentioned this, I'm like, we ought to try to arrange that. That would be amazing.
Yes, and Mamaram too. They're just amazing. They're like a mom and dad to us all. You know, at some point they've touched everybody's lives.
Yeah, no, that would be really great.
We interviewed Shruti last week, so she'll be the first interview. It's going to air today about 4:30 or something.
Hey, your daughter?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So she's the first interview. My grandmother will come out next week. She was our second, and then you're our third interview. So we're kind of using you like a guinea pig.
Yeah.
Oh, this is so exciting. No, I thought this was something that you had already in progress.
We've been doing podcasts, but not interviews.
Yeah.
We've been talking to each other for like 40 episodes. We thought maybe we should let people hear from other people. And so that's what we're doing now is we're going to eventually be putting out both. Right now, we're kind of focusing on getting the interviews rolling, and then we'll go back to the others as well. And we'll be putting out like 2 a week. But I'll send you a link and stuff when your video's up. It'll be 2 weeks because it'll probably be 2 weeks. It might air a little earlier depending on how much I get my editing together.
No problem at all. No, it was a real pleasure to talk with you both. And Hans, now we know each other more, so I'll ask more about you next time since you know a lot about me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, I look forward to seeing you again, and we'll definitely have to have you back. Yeah.
And thank you everyone who's listening. This has been Answers of Life, and we've had Zita here with us talking about the education system. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, follow, whatever it is you need to do on whatever platform you're viewing or hearing this on. And if you liked us, maybe leave us a 5-star review if you're listening on Apple Podcast. And if you didn't like us that much, still share it with somebody that maybe you just don't like that much. So send it to them. Although I'm not sure why you listened to however long this was if you didn't like it. But,
oh my gosh.
We'll see you guys next time. Thank you.
All right.